Welcome to another round of Coffee and Donuts. I'm Frank. If you don't know who I am, I'm the former federal law enforcement officer, now the training director of law enforcement here at Armageddon. And this is Coffee and Donuts, where I answer your questions about becoming or succeeding in the law enforcement profession. Let's discuss. Before I jump into it, if you want your questions answered, you can leave them on any of our social platforms. We get over and we answer all of them at least once a week. Additionally, if you're looking to have your question answered the quickest, you can go over to our new blog on our website, armageddonct.com, and leave your questions over there, and we will get to them immediately. Now, I got some really good ones, and two of these kind of tie in together, so I'm excited because I get to expand a little bit here. Now, forgive me, I'm just coming off a cold too. Do they call current employers as well? So this is in reference to doing a background check. Do they call current employers as well? That would probably put the applicant at risk if they don't get hired. Yes, I actually agree with this, and that is a risk that is out there. They do contact current employers. Sometimes certain departments will allow you to mark a check box as to do not contact my current employer. Now, that is not a guarantee. That is just saying, hey, I request that you don't, but they still can do a reference check there if they would like. But at some point in time, they will probably contact your current employer. Now, what does that mean for you? Could that hurt you in the long run? Yes, it could. One thing that I would recommend is kind of making sure you articulate it and kind of, I would undersell it, honestly, to your current employer. Just say, hey, I ended up submitting an application to this police department for these circumstances. Maybe someone recommended or whatever. I have no intention to leave. The hiring process can take a year, but they may contact you guys. I just wanted to give you a heads up. But as of right now, I have no desire or intentions of leaving. And I would make it known to your current employer, saying it that way, for the sheer fact that you don't have any intentions of leaving, because the hiring process is never a guarantee, right? It's never a guarantee. So when you make that statement, you're being truthful, right? Hey, right now I have no intention on leaving, and you should be kind of forthcoming with that. I tell a lot of coaching members, if they're still hesitant, you can usually wait until the background phase kicks off, till you make it through the the board interview, the written and physical testing. But that's not always the case. Sometimes background investigators like to start early on as soon as the applicant applies. So there's no guarantee. I will say this is, it looks worse to an employer if they're blindsided, at least in my opinion. I would try to get out ahead of it. That way you don't lose your job, potentially, especially if you don't get hired. But yes, this is a risk that is potentially out there, and one that you will accept when you start applying to become a police officer. Next, I received a written reprimand at work after being there 8 months. Will this disqualify me? So, a couple things. No, this won't disqualify you. Does it look bad? Yes, because it's within that time frame. And I break down time frames with certain different qualifications. So like a written reprimand, usually you don't want one within the last year, but it's not going to disqualify you. Once again, you can articulate. Now, the reason for the reprimand can be a major factor, right? If you were given a reprimand for doing something dangerous or something and it's within the last year, it could hurt you, right? Will it disqualify you? No, but it's something that you're going to have to explain, and that might be using your one kind of get out of jail free card, as I like to call it, with your background investigator, where hey, I'll hear you out on this one thing, explain it to me, and it better come across really well. The other concept to this is, so I like all reprimands to not be within the year. Now, that doesn't mean you won't get hired. It just means it's what I prefer. Then I have other years. I have a 3-year indicator for certain things, and then I have a 7-year indicator for other things. And usually, if anything's way past 7 years, that's usually my golden number. But it doesn't have to be to get hired. So just so you know that. It's going to matter more what this is. What was the reprimanded for than it is when you received it. And then being there for 8 months, you received a reprimand. If this was just a counseling on like, hey, you did this and you messed up on the training and we're just reprimanding you, giving you a written counseling, showing that we've retrained you, that's easy to articulate. if you crashed a forklift into a $1 million piece of art and you were given a reprimand for that, it's going to be a little bit harder to explain. So just kind of keep that in mind. It all deals with context and the specifics of the situation. But that's where articulation comes in. All right. Now this goes into the next one. When they investigate, when in the investigation process, there we go. How do I address wrongful termination/separations with previous employers? Or should I just make sure the investigator knows that I had a separation with no further explanation? Well, first and foremost, you're never going to get away with that, with just saying, hey, I was terminated or separated from XYZ. No, because every background packet that I've ever seen said, hey, have you ever been terminated or separated for this from any place of employment? You mark yes, and then it says, please explain any yeses. Or when you're filling out your work history, it says reason for leaving. You will have to put terminated, and then you're going to not want to leave it just blank, right? Or just leave it just terminated or separated. You're going to want to give context. But this is where you be specific, don't elaborate, and stick to the facts. Don't go in there and say, oh, I was terminated because I called out my boss because he was having an affair with his assistant and yada, 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 and then they terminated me for stealing pencils. No, you were terminated for stealing pencils. I understand the context and why, right? And I get all that, but those are the facts. You were terminated for stealing pencils. That's what you have to list. Right now, if it's something simple as, hey, I was in my probationary period and it was a sales position and I just wasn't making the amount of sales that they wanted me to make, therefore they terminated me, you would just articulate, hey, was terminated from this position, was unable to meet sales quota. That's it. Those are the facts, right? You would just list the facts. Do not go into perspective. Do not go into, hey, my boss had it out for me. I was supposed to be given a promotion and they wanted it to go to someone else. So no, that's all, whatever the reason for termination is. And unless you're contending the termination and you're trying to be reinstated, which then they're just going to ask you, well, why are you contending it to be reinstated? Then you would have to articulate like, hey, I'm contending it so it's not a termination on my record because I believe I was wrongfully terminated. Great. But then one of the questions that might be in your background packet is, are you currently in any civil lawsuits or any adjudication? There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. Adjudication with any previous employers. You'll have to mark yes. And that's just the way it works. So there's a lot to this, but yeah, terminations, reprimands, all of that will have some type of impact on your hiring process, especially the more recent they are. So remember, time and distance makes every hurdle smaller. That's all the way from, you worrying about them calling your current employer to receiving a reprimand to being terminated. So hope this helps. Remember, if you want your questions answered, I cannot speak today. If you want your questions answered, we answer them on all our social platforms. We get over to the questions on our website blog first, where you can go in there and see much more detail of the hiring process, the academy, FTO, anything you need to know about having a successful career in law enforcement. Stay safe, and I will see you next time.